Hey guys. So scenes are one of the many building blocks of writing. It's pretty difficult to have a story without scenes. Now, there's a lot to know when it comes to writing scenes, and there's many different types of scenes that can be written. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to get into the basics of all scenes and sort of the anatomy when it comes to the most common type of scene. First and foremost, let's define what a scene is. A scene is a micro story. It's a single unit of story that makes up your larger narrative. They contain all the same parts as a larger story. They have beginnings, they have middles, they have ends, tension, character, stakes, setting, all of that, but they are much more limited. The best way to think of scenes, in my case, is always to imagine them as stage plays. So every time the lights go down, the sets change, the characters leave, that's when the scene ends. There's like a physicality to changing scenes in stage plays that really makes it clear in my mind. For comics, there's other similar ideas to notify kind of when a scene ends. So there's tends to be palette changes, there's entrance of new characters, there's new settings. All of these changes are really good signifiers that this is a scene, this is where it ends, this is where it begins. However, none of this really takes into the full scope of what scenes can be, because you can have scenes back to back without setting and characters changing. Because like I said earlier, scenes are micro stories, and stories are first and foremost dictated kind of by their plot. So if you are needing to write a scene, I implore you to make a list of the following, either before you write it or after you've written out your whole script and are now editing. Every scene will have the following, okay? So it'll have 1, a central purpose, 2, characters, 3, setting, 4, a time of day, and 5, a mood. The central purpose is by far the most important, so I'll address it last, but the other elements are very important as well. For one, when you write out all of these, it can give you an idea of the design work you need. So listing characters and setting will give you a good overview of all the base designs that you'll need to design. Meanwhile, time of day and mood will help you tailor those base designs for the very specific situations, especially through the means of color changes, like palette changes. Mood and time of day really reflect that, as well as the slight differences in time of day and mood will also inform some slight design alterations, or they'll inform you that you need a character that can exist in all sorts of different scene settings. That's the majority of what I'll talk about for those aspects. So let's get back into the writing part. Let's get into the most difficult and most important thing to understand about scenes, and that is the central purpose thing I was talking about. So every scene you write has one job, okay? While several other things may occur, be revealed, etc., etc., the scene does not weight its focus on them in the same way that its central point will. Everything is building to the central point of your scene. A successful scene is one that gets that central focus across. So choosing your scene's job, well, that's like a whole other topic for a whole other day. But let's use my comic The Magpie as an example, and I'm going to go tell you the central purpose of the first 10 scenes of the comic, okay? So scene 1, it establishes that monsters/desire will make people do bad things. 2, it introduces the fact that Amanda can't leave Pinewood. Scene 3 is Trixie's introduction. Scene 4 introduces the fact that Amanda is a loner. Scene 5 introduces Dylan. Scene 6 introduces the first rule of Pinewood. Scene 7 introduces Chris and Dennis. Scene 8 introduces the second rule of Pinewood. Scene 9 introduces the Margie and Dennis conflict. And Scene 10 shows the contrast between the gossip and the reality in Pinewood. So, yes, obviously there is a lot more learned in each of these scenes, but the point stands. These are the prompts I work off when I'm writing a story. As you can see at the beginning of the story, there is a lot of introductions that need to happen. This lines up with our plot graph. The main conflict is introduced very early, but there's still tons of subplots that need to be introduced, and other elements of context that also need to be introduced for the story to function. And it's very important that each of these major introductions has their own scene that supports their weight. But how does an introduction scene have its own beginning, middle, and end? That doesn't make sense, does it? So let's take one of these scenes and break it apart. Let's use scene 6, which begins on page 28 and ends on page 35. Okay, so this scene's purpose is to establish rule number 1 of Pinewood. So typically, the purpose of the scene is achieved rather than outright given. There's plenty of knowledge that is given in this scene, especially previously earned knowledge. Like anything that was the purpose of an older scene can now be freely gifted to the reader. So in this case, Amanda's loner status, it's just reiterated. Trixie is reaffirmed to be new to things. Amanda's babysitting of Dylan, it's all just casually mentioned. Since all this stuff is known, again, it's free. You can give it however you please. The purpose of the scene, however, is stuck behind the conflict. In order to learn the rule of Pinewood, we need to pass the conflict. So, what is the conflict? Well, I've said it before, but conflict is when one character wants something and something else is in the way. So Trixie wants Amanda to talk to her, but Amanda is stubborn and shutting her out. So that's the scene's conflict. Trixie just wants to have a conversation with Amanda. She wants to connect with her. And through connecting with her, we're able to learn about Pinewood and then earn a final understanding of the rule. So when I think about it, we can even stick scene 6 onto our plot graph and you would perfectly see how it would work. So introduction. Amanda wants nothing to do with Trixie. That is our status quo. Inciting incident occurs when Trixie attempts to strike up a conversation with her. Our rising action is where Amanda continues to shut the conversation down repeatedly. Our midpoint occurs when Trixie finally stops pushing and she apologizes for the way that the other teens have been treating Amanda. And in return, Amanda gives some information. So we have the setup for our payoff. However, in the case of our rising action, Trixie reacts confused to Amanda's description of Pinewood, so Amanda returns to being shut down. The revelation occurs when Trixie realizes that small talk isn't going to work, and she reveals to Amanda that her mother has passed away, and that leads to our climax, where Amanda finally understands that the attempt of friendship is sincere. And our resolution occurs then when Amanda talks to Trixie about Pinewood's first rule. So it's compacted a lot more than it would be with a big story. And I find the lines are difficult to draw in the case of a scene, but it's still pretty good. It still fits in it. And you'll find a lot of scenes, as long as they have conflict, you can basically put them into a plot graph like that. The main difference I find in scenes is the resolution. Scenes kind of in the middle of your story and the beginning of your story resolve the conflict within the scene, but they usually end with a bittersweet resolution, which ramps up tension rather than decompressing. It's where the yes, but, no, and thing comes in. I wouldn't call it ending with a cliffhanger, but rather a teaser. Because a scene ends with an implication that there's more. It ends with interest, intrigue, all that fun stuff. Whereas a cliffhanger is more akin to kind of like the biggest mistake I see in creating scenes. And that's where a scene ends before the scene's conflict is resolved. It isn't tense when this happens. It's just kind of abrupt and annoying. So resolve your scene, determine what the conflict of the scene is, and then add your twist, add your intrigue, add further conflict to the story at large, rather than just abruptly ending before Trixie and Amanda ever even talk. In the case of Trixie and Amanda, yes, Amanda does open up, but it's not a pleasant conversation, and it's just gonna lead to more monsters and depression in the future. and it's intriguing, and it continues on thusly. Sorry, this is Slapdash. If there's any further questions you have on creating scenes, I'd be happy to answer them. I think I can talk about all this stuff forever and never fully be able to articulate it all. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscription. Don't leave your subscription. Please continue to be a subscribe bell flippin' thing. If you want to check out the Magpie, you should. If you don't, you can not, I guess. I was happy to talk to you guys on the live streams. I hope I see you again on Saturday. We'll be doing another one. It'll be great. Ursula will be there. We'll talk. I don't know what we're gonna draw, but I'll be happy to be there. Thank you so much for watching. Help me.